Hi, Rob from the Brush and Bolt Gun here. Today I'm going to be doing a short tutorial on how to paint an Ork Meganob. The first colour that we're going to use is Citadel Waaagh Flesh. We're just going to use that to do the base colour for all his flesh. When we come back, we'll have all the Waaagh flesh finished. So next we're going to be using Citadel Leadbelcher, and that's just going to be to do a lot of the edges of the metal parts, a lot of the frames and that kind of thing, and some of these little clasps and stuff here. When we come back, I'll have all of the Leadbelcher finished. Okay, so we've done plenty of the metal parts on him now. What we're going to be looking at now is adding a few more little colours of metallics to this model. So we're going to start with Skullcrusher brass, and for that we're going to be using it on a lot of these domes at the top here, and a few of the smaller details just to add a bit more colour to the model. You can see that's coming on a little bit streaky where I'm painting it there. So if you do paint it on, it's a bit streaky, you're not quite happy with it, just give it another coat, and that should sort it out. Don't know if you noticed in the background there, but I've had my Ork army for nearly 10 years, or started it about 10 years ago anyway. And you can see in the background there, you've got some of the old style Meganobz. Oh no, that's not one. There we go, this guy is one of the old style ones, so you can see the height difference in them. The new ones are a bit bigger, or the newer ones are a bit bigger I should say. But I've changed a few parts on these. That's one of the Black Ork helmets there, and then you've got this guy here has got one of the helmets from the newer Storm Boys box, and a few little details that I've taken from the new Meganobz box and added them to these guys as well, just to bring them up to the other ones, make them look a bit better with a few more of the cool details on them. Anyway, back to the Skullcrusher brass. When we come back, we'll have all the Skullcrusher brass finished. Now we're just going to add some Citadel Fulgurite copper. I'm just going to colour in a few more of the details, these dome things around the model. Now I do really like this Fulgurite copper because there seems to be loads of pigment in it. It gives really good coverage. It's also a really nice colour. When we come back, we're going to have all the Fulgurite copper finished. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Retributor armour. We're going to use that just to paint a few of the details, like the pistons and things. Now, if you've watched any of the videos that I've done where someone's got pistons on, you've probably noticed that I always paint the pistons gold. And again, like the downpipes on the Ork truck that I painted in the last video, this all dates back to a motorbike as well. My first one had, I think it was Brembo shock absorbers on the front, and they were a really nice set of forks. They looked really nice to get the gold at the top, and since then, every time I've painted pistons on anything, they've always been gold. When we come back, I'll have all the Retributor armour finished. The next colour that we're using is Vallejo Model Air Chrome. I'm going to use this for the shafts of the pistons. It's a nice shiny metallic, just to bring out a few more little details on the model itself. I've had these for years. I've got to say, I do like the Ork models. The amount of details and little features on them, they're great to paint up. When we come back, we'll have all the Model Air Chrome finished. Now to do the coils at the top, we're going to be using Citadel Armour Blue. I'm just going to give that a coat all over. When we come back, we'll have all the Averland blue finished. Next we're going to be using some Citadel Soulstone blue. We're going to be using that to go over the Averland blue that we've just put on the coils at the top. When we come back, we'll have all the Soulstone blue finished. Completely missed this part when I was doing the last two sections, so I've just cut that up to the same level as these, and now we're going to start adding the Averland blue and building up the layers on the top part. Now the reason I'm doing it in this order, I haven't done all the base coats for everything else yet, is because we've got that many cables and things that go to the outside of it. I didn't want to paint those and then have to paint all this bit around those, because there's washers and there's going to be loads of different layers on this. So what I've decided to do, this section, and then once I've done this section and painted this completely, we can do all the wiring around it then and work on that so that this part's completed first. So now I'm just going to add some more Averland blue again and get this layer built up. I'm using a small layer brush here. When we come back, we'll have all the Averland blue done. Right, now that we've got the Averland blue reapplied, we've added some white to the Averland blue, and we're just going to do the first highlight on these sections. What I'm trying to do is spread the highlight around each section, and if there's a little kink in there or a little groove like on this part, we're just going to go around the edge of that as well, because we want all the edges to be a lighter colour than the rest. I probably could have done with adding a little bit more white, but that's not a problem. We can just add a little bit more in the next layer. That should sort that out. When we come back, we'll have all of this highlight finished. Right, now that we have the first layer highlighted, we're now just going to add a little bit more white to the mix. We're going to add another layer of highlights to it. What we're trying to go for here is trying to get it to look like these sections have got a glow. So as we add more and more highlights, they're slowly getting thinner and thinner until they're very, very light. I'll probably do maybe one more or two more on top of this. We want it to look like it's energized in some way for his custom force field there. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. Now I'm just going to do one final highlight on the coils. We've added a bit more white to the mix. We're just going to be doing a really, really thin line on all these edges. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. Now that we have the coils completed, we're just going to use Fulgurite copper again. We're just going to do where all these wires join onto the coils. We're just going to colour them in copper. I'll continue painting all these wires copper, and once they're done, we'll be back to finish the next layer. Next we're going to be using some Averland Sunset. That's going to be to do some of the wires that are around his armour. When we come back, we'll have all the Averland Sunset finished. Now we're going to be using some Mephiston Red. We're going to be using that to do some of the wires and some of the details. When we come back, we'll have all the Mephiston Red finished. Next colour is going to be Vallejo White. You can use any white for this really, it doesn't really matter too much. We're just going to be doing the teeth on the armour, some stripes on his kecks, and a few other little details with it. When we come back, we'll have all of the white finished. Next we're going to be using Citadel Kantor blue. I'm going to use that to touch up the blue where it hasn't sprayed onto the model properly. This isn't the exact blue that I used originally. I think it was Vallejo French blue or something similar to that, because I used to do my orcs in a lot brighter blue colour. But I am starting to do them a little bit more dark, so Kantor blue fits quite well. And when we come back, we'll have all the Kantor blue finished. Next we're just going to use a little bit of Vallejo dark blue. I'm going to use that to do highlights on his armour. Now, although I've used 2 different blues to do his armour so far, it doesn't really matter which blues that you use for it. I tend to use Macragge blue for my Death Skulls now. I sprayed these quite some time ago with a Vallejo colour, and I'm pretty sure it was French blue. But whatever colour that you use to do your base coat of the blue, just choose a relevant highlight for that and use that. So when you're highlighting this model, as I tend to with most of them, I'm just highlighting the areas where the light's going to catch it. I don't want to put any highlights on the underside, so they get a bit of natural shading. So when we come back, we'll have all the highlights done. Okay, now you can see we've done the rough highlights on the orc there. All we're going to do now is we're going to sponge on some Vallejo black battle damage to him. We're also going to do a few of the cables in black as well. Just use a little piece of the packing sponge from Games Workshop blister packs, and we're just going to dab that into some black, and then you're going to dab off the access on a piece of paper or something similar, and then you're just going to lightly sponge that onto the armour, giving as much battle damage as you actually want on the model. When we come back, we'll have all of the black done. Now we're just going to use some Vallejo Modeler steel, and that is to do all the little chips that we've just put onto his armour. When we come back, we'll have all of Vallejo Modeler steel done. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Macragge blue. I'm going to use that on the stripes on his pants. Like so. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Warboss green. I'm going to use that to do some of the wires that haven't been coloured in yet, and also his bionic eye and a few of the smaller details. When we come back, we'll have all the Warboss green finished. Next, just using a little bit of Citadel Rakarth flesh. That's just to do a few of the orc teeth which are hanging from him, and also I think there's one or two in his mouth as well. Now before I do the rest of the teeth in his mouth, I'm just going to go back and use a little bit of Mephiston Red just to fill the gaps between his teeth. You can work on his teeth after we've put the shades on. Next we're using Vallejo Beige Brown. I'm just going to use that to do a lot of the bindings and the loops and areas where it looks like it's tied together with cord. And when we come back, we'll have all the beige brown finished. Now we're moving on to the shades. I'm going to start with Null Oil, as always. I'm just going to go over all the silvery metallics and also his armour, just to add the first level of grime to that. When we come back, we'll have all the Null Oil finished. Continuing with the shades, we're now going to use a Graxer shade. This is going to be to do all of the areas that are done in copper or a gold or a brass, and also to add another little bit of grime between all the joints in the arms. Now this adds a nice brown colour to all the joints and things like that, and it just gives them that worn and weathered and dirty look that you'd expect from something that's not been cleaned and polished all the time. When we come back, we'll have all the Graxer shade finished. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of Seraphim Sepia. This is just going to be to put a little bit of dirt onto the yellow cables and also to shade some of the teeth. Like so. Now we're just going to use a touch of Beeltan Green shade, and that's going to be to do the orc's skin and lens on his eye. Like so. Next we're just going to use a little bit of Druchii Violet, and that's just going to be to go onto all the reds. Like so. Next we're going to be working on the eye lens, so we're just going to use a little bit of German Camp Bright Green to bring that lens back up to the green colour that we had it at before, being sure to leave areas around the edges darkened by the shade that we applied. Now what we're going to do is add a little tiny bit of white to the green. I'm just going to do a few little highlights on it. Now, if you've watched any of the other videos or you've looked on the blog, you'll see that I tend to do these with a crescent of lighter colour down one side like that. Then we add a tiny little bit more white to the mix. We do a slightly smaller highlight. We can probably extend that over to the other side, to be honest, so I'm just going to do a little spot. Then I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. Do one final highlight with green. Next, all we're going to do is add a little spot of white on the top right here, and a slight line of white on the very bottom of the lens here. The final thing we want to do for that is just use a tiny little bit of BL Tan green once again, and we're just going to darken the top right hand side of that lens. Now I've changed brushes here, I'm using an Army Painter Wargamer character brush, like so. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Citadel Rakarth flesh again, and that's just going to be to highlight the teeth. Then we're going to add a little tiny bit of white to the Rakarth flesh and just do one final highlight on those teeth. Next, we're going to be working on some of the red buttons, and what we're going to do for that is use a little bit of Mephiston Red just to bring the red back out again so that the shade hasn't made it too dark. You're not going to do that all the way around, you're just going to do that on probably about 3/4 of each part, so you're leaving quite a dark bit in one corner, like so. Then we've added a little bit of white to Mephiston Red, and we are just going to do in the bottom corner, just like we did on the lens, a highlight there. We're going to do the same on the side of the lens. Now we're going to use the Army Painter character brush again. We're going to add a little bit more white to the mix, so we have got quite a pink mix now. I'm just going to do the very bottom, like so. Now we're just going to use a tiny spot of white to dab that in the corner. You can do 2 spots if you want, so we'll do 2 spots there. And then we're going to do a very small white line on this button here, or on this light here, like so. Same again for this one. And do a really thin white line and 1 spot of light at the top there. Now I'm going to repeat that process on all of the red buttons, so over this side and on the other side as well. And then once you've done them, we're going to use, at the end when you've varnished it, you want to use gloss varnish on those to make them shine. The final thing we're going to work on is his skin, and for that you're going to use Citadel Waaagh flesh again. We're just going to reapply some of the colour to it. Like so. Next we're adding some Warboss green to the mix just to lighten up that. I don't want to go straight to Warboss green because I want the skin to be slightly darker than the rest of the orcs. So we've added a little bit of Warboss green to that, and we're just going to highlight the muscle once again. Always, if there's a ridge above where you're highlighting, I always leave a little bit of the shade underneath that, just because the ridge above it would cast a bit of shadow. Final colour that I'm going to use is Citadel Necron Compound, the dry paint, and that's just to add a little bit of shine to all the edges where it'll be scraped. It is a really good paint, this, so if you are doing miniatures like orcs especially, or maybe Necrons and things like that where you wanted to paint them so it looks like the metal's chipped and scuffed, this is a great way of just getting a nice shine to the edges of things where it will be chipped and scuffed with little to no effort. You don't really need to be overly careful if you're working on the edges. Obviously you don't want to smother the whole model in it, you just want to get the actual parts where there's been a bit of wear and tear. When we come back we'll have all the Necron compound finished, and the Meganobz should be done. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content, and also think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much. So after painting the model, all I've done for the base is used Citadel textured Astro Granite, washed it with Nuln Oil, highlighted it with Mechanic's standard grey, and then highlighted it with a lighter shade of grey and then white.